Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we're diving into a mystery that is honestly, it's so profound, and the math is so massive that it literally shatters a core assumption of modern physics. We're looking at one highly specific calculation in the closure-loop gas framework that basically forces us to completely rewrite the universe's origin story. So strap in, because the scale of what we're about to cover is absolutely mind-bending.
So right off the bat, here's the big question we've got to ask ourselves. How does a single number completely break our standard understanding of how the universe was born? For decades, a huge chunk of modern cosmology just assumed that the foundational substrate of our universe, the vacuum itself, was forged in this state of thermal equilibrium, like it basically just boiled into existence. But what if the math flat out says, no way?
And that brings us to the number itself, 10 to the power of 198. I mean, just let the sheer magnitude of that sink in for a second. It's an impossibly massive number. It mathematically eclipses the value of 1 by nearly 200 orders of magnitude. We're not talking about some tiny rounding error here. This is a definitive, universe-breaking result that completely invalidates the thermal origin model of modern cosmology. But where does this staggering number actually come from? Okay, let's dive into this. The answer lies in something called the Y-discriminant. Imagine that the vacuum of space isn't just empty nothingness, but is actually woven from microscopic quantum loops. In the closure-loop gas framework, the vacuum is made up of exactly these loops. So the Y-discriminant is essentially the ultimate mathematical test to figure out exactly how those loops were born. It asks a really simple question. Was this loop vacuum created by thermal energy, or was it something else entirely?
Think of the Y-discriminant like the universe's thermal budget. Mathematically, it's an equation that takes the universe's present-day loop density and normalizes it against an absolute thermal ceiling. The rule is simple. If the resulting Y value is less than or equal to 1, well, the universe stayed within its thermal budget. That means a thermal origin is totally possible. But if Y is greater than 1, the universe drastically exceeded its thermal budget, meaning there is absolutely no way it was born through thermal equilibrium.
So, this equation forces a hard fork in the road for physics. On one side, we've got path 2a, the thermal origin. This has been the traditional assumption, but it strictly requires Y to be less than or equal to 1. On the other side, there's path 2b, the non-thermal relic pathway. Now, this path is completely mandated if Y is greater than 1, which would mean the vacuum was forged in some violent, out-of-equilibrium event. And this sets up the whole detective story of how scientists actually went about calculating Y.
All right, moving into section 1, deriving the loop mass.
To actually calculate the Y-discriminant, we have to get really meticulous with the math. We need the exact inputs for the equation, right? But we can't just guess them, or, artificially tune them to fit our theories. We have to derive them from the universe's own internal logic. No cheating allowed. We have to find the endogenous loop mass scale. Think of it like having absolutely no free dials to turn. The universe locked these parameters in all by itself. The source material shows that the fundamental loop mass scale, the Planck mass, emerges exactly where the quantum world perfectly crosses over into the gravitational world. That's where the quantum Compton wavelength perfectly matches the gravitational Schwarzschild length. And because of this perfect intersection, the threshold energy locks to the Planck energy, scalar degeneracy locks to 1, and the string tension perfectly matches the Planck tension.
And that brings us to this absolutely crucial quote. The universe locked the dials itself. No free parameters remain. Because these parameters are purely endogenous, meaning they're derived from the deepest structural requirements of reality itself, rather than just some human estimation. The resulting Y-discriminant we're about to calculate isn't just a best guess or a consistency check. It is a hard, mathematical prediction.
Which brings us to section 2, shattering the thermal ceiling.
Okay, now that we have our locked parameters, derived right from that intersection of gravity and quantum mechanics, we can finally calculate the universe's thermal budget. And this is where the standard model gets completely turned on its head. First, we have to establish the ceiling. This number, 0.4099, is the absolute thermal ceiling constant, or C star. The mathematical function governing thermal production hits its absolute maximum right here. Actually, as a super fascinating side note from the source material, this constant maps almost exactly to Earth's present axial tilt when you express it in radians. Kind of wild, right? But for our physics equation, this 0.4099 is the absolute speed limit for a thermal origin.
Now, what's really interesting here is just how violently the standard model fails when we plug in our derived numbers. The Y value doesn't just, barely miss that 0.4099 ceiling. It exceeds it by 198 orders of magnitude. To forcefully contort the math just to make a thermal origin somehow work, you would literally need to inflate the loop radius to an impossible size. We're talking nearly 40,000 times the radius of the entire observable universe. No way.
Let's move on to Section 3, a frozen, non-thermal relic.
All right, since the thermal path is mathematically dead and just permanently annihilated, the universe has to exist on the non-thermal branch. This means the vacuum of our universe isn't some boiling soup, it's a frozen cosmological relic of a violent, early, out-of-equilibrium event, like a phase transition or inflationary reheating. But wait, you might be wondering, if the universe isn't creating these loops thermally anymore, could they be spontaneously nucleating today through, say, quantum tunneling? Absolutely not. The framework calculates the bounce action exponent for present-day nucleation to be 10 to the power of 256. Think of this as an impossibly steep mathematical wall that completely prevents loops from just popping into existence today. It mathematically guarantees that present-day vacuum nucleation is entirely suppressed.
So, present-day vacuum nucleation is just dead. The loop gas is a frozen cosmological relic. And this really forces us to completely reframe our view of the macro versus the micro. The vast macro-level cosmological constant we observe today is completely dictated by these tiny, tiny quantum loops that have been locked and frozen since the absolute dawn of time.
That takes us to Section 4, fixing the cosmic tensions.
Now, you might be wondering, okay, this is a cool origin story, but what does it actually mean for our understanding of the universe right now? Well, this is where we find an incredibly satisfying resolution, because it turns out this framework doesn't just rewrite the past, it accidentally solves the biggest headaches in modern astronomy. Currently, standard cosmology is battling two massive crises. First, there's the H0 tension, where local observations show the universe expanding significantly faster than early universe models predict. Second, we have the SA tension, where the actual clustering of matter in the universe is measurably lower or smoother than our models predict. Standard models treat these as separate, completely baffling errors.
But the Nexus framework actually provides a parameter-free resolution to both of these problems, using something called the Samson V2 controller. Think of it like a highly advanced cosmic thermostat that's actively striving for harmonic balance by coupling matter and vacuum energy. It's literally a cybernetic proportional integral derivative, or PID, control architecture operating directly within the vacuum of space-time. It seamlessly regulates the universe's matter density against its dark energy density through what's known as the Nexus-Friedmann Control Law.
Let's see how this builds step by step. Under the Nexus-Friedmann Control Law, as the universe expands, matter dilutes. Eventually, it hits a highly specific critical redshift, ZC, right around 0.054, which corresponds to the last 800 million years or so. And when this threshold is crossed, a spontaneous symmetry breaking activates. A torsion coupling mechanism dynamically bleeds energy from the clustered dark matter sector directly into the dark energy sector. The universe is actively correcting its own density.
And the results are amazing. By transferring this energy late in the universe's life, the dark energy sector gets a boost, which enhances the Hubble expansion rate, or H0, by 1.5% to 3%, perfectly solving the H0 tension. At the exact same time, bleeding energy from the matter sector damps the structure growth, S8, by 10% to 15%, perfectly solving the S8 tension. Both massive crises in astronomy resolve simultaneously by a single mechanism with strictly zero free parameters added. It's a real game changer.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the final cosmic verdict.
We have covered some incredible ground today. We've traced the endogenous derivation of the loop mass scale, we've watched the Y-discriminant completely obliterate the thermal ceiling, and we've seen how a frozen universe organically regulates its own cosmic tensions. It's a monumental shift, going from this thermal assumption to a non-thermal, mathematically rigid reality. And the source material leaves absolutely no room for debate here. The math is closed, the algebra is closed, and the numerics are resolved. As the researcher concludes, quote, "Thermal relic production of the loop substrate is categorically and permanently falsified. We are literally living inside a relic."
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. If the vacuum of our reality wasn't gently boiled into existence, but was instead forged in a violent, out-of-equilibrium event and instantly frozen in time, what other ancient, hidden echoes are still waiting to be discovered out there in the cosmic web? Thank you so much for exploring this massive anomaly with us, and keep your eyes open for the next explainer.